Hi everybody, welcome to BIMS TV. My name is Rose Santana and this is BIMS Bites. And today we're going to be taking a bite out of the changing Arctic. Now in order to do that, we need to travel to Earth's northernmost point. So the Arctic region is a polar region located at the northernmost point of the Earth. It consists of the Arctic Ocean, adjacent seas, and parts of Alaska, Canada, Finland, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, and Sweden. Yikes, that's a lot of countries, right? So, what exactly is happening and how is it changing? Well, the effects of global warming in the Arctic include rising temperatures, loss of sea ice, and melting of the Greenland ice sheets, loss of permafrost, social consequences for local indigenous communities, and the geopolitical ramifications of these changes. In fact, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, the Arctic is now warming at more than twice the rate of the rest of the planet, with 60% of ice volume having been lost in the last 30 years. Yikes, right? So let's break that down a little bit into more manageable points and let's talk about the impacts on the natural environment. So according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, surface air temperatures in the Arctic have warmed at approximately twice the global rate. Sea ice in the Arctic is currently in decline in area, extent, and volume, and has been accelerating during the early 21st century with a decline rate of roughly 4.7% per decade. Now, this can also have effects on both changes in animals and changes in vegetation. One of the major effects of climate change is a strong increase in the number of lightnings in the Arctic, and this will increase risks of wildfires happening. Now, the northward shift of the subarctic climate zone is allowing animals that are adapted to the climate to move into the far north, where they are replacing species that are more adapted to a pure Arctic climate change. In fact, have you ever heard of the Pizzly bear or the growler bear? These sort of hybrid species are happening because grizzly bears are making their way further up north and breeding with polar bears. And overall, as we saw in the previous slide, we've noticed that there's just a drastic decrease in sea ice, which is also where a lot of these pictures come in with polar bears that are starved or are stuck on ice because they can no longer travel around. And without that critical sea ice, it makes it very difficult for them to migrate between areas and hunt for food. There was also case studies of reindeer dying out because of the fact that they could no longer navigate their way to looking for food or shelter. Now, a next big issue that we don't really talk about too much, or not enough in my opinion, is permafrost melting. So permafrost is ground that continuously remains frozen at below 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 or more years at a time. Permafrost contains large amounts of biomass and decomposed biomass that has been stored as methane and carbon dioxide, making the tundra soil a carbon sink. That's great, right? Well, as global warming heats the ecosystems and causes these soils to thaw, the permafrost carbon cycle accelerates and releases much of these soil-contained greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, creating a feedback cycle that in turn increases climate change. It's a vicious cycle. In fact, in recent years, we've even seen increases of contaminants that were thought to have been or were frozen in these permafrost now making their ways back into the ecosystems. So that's not necessarily a good thing. Now, one of the first things people typically think about when they think about melting polar regions is sea level rise. Ultimately, the biggest concerns are changes in tropical patterns, stronger storms in the North Atlantic, and reduced European crop productivity are amongst some of the most potential repercussions of these things. In fact, effects on other parts of the world. Because it's easy for us to say out of sight, out of mind when it comes to the polar regions. Unless we see it in our backyard, we tend not to think about it too much. And Florida, along with other low-lying parts of the world, are constantly seeing, the impact and feeling the impacts of sea level rise. But that's not the only issue. Did you know in 2021, scientists reported that the accelerated higher variability warming of the Arctic is causing more frequent, extremely cold winter weather across parts of Asia and North America, including the February 2021 North American cold wave that caused many issues, especially in Texas, because some of these places just don't have the proper infrastructure to be able to deal with cold storms like this. And another issue is the impacts on people. As ice sea coverage decreases more and more year on year, Arctic countries like Russia, Canada, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, the United States, and Denmark are making moves on the geopolitical stage to ensure access to potential new shipping lanes, oil, and gas reserves that are there, leading to overlapping claims across regions. Yikes. As climate change speeds up, it is having more and more of a a direct impact on societies around the world. And this is particularly true for the indigenous people that live in the Arctic, where increases in temperature are occurring at faster rates than in other latitudes in the world, and where traditional ways of living deeply connected with the natural Arctic ecosystems and environments are at particular risk of environmental disruption caused by these changes. These communities pass down traditional knowledge from generation to generation, and as the climate changes, we're seeing that, this information no longer holds true, which is devastating for these communities. The melting of Arctic ice caps is likely to increase traffic in and the commercial viability of the northern sea route. So we can imagine many more cargo ships flowing through. It's going to be a trade route. There's going to be more cruise ships, and the thought of an environmental catastrophe like an oil spill happening up there is just so devastating. And these projected shifts in trade also imply substantial pressure on an already threatened Arctic ecosystem. Unfortunately, these are things that we should be thinking about, especially when we talk about climate change and how it affects everybody everywhere in the world. And unfortunately, there is no one-stop solution for it. It's just one day at a time. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe Black and Marine Science on all of our social media handles, where we constantly post cool new facts about marine science. And if you have any questions or just want to chat, feel free to contact me below on any of my social media handles. Thank you so much. And as always, stay frosty.